And now on to our keynote speaker. And I have the honor and the privilege of introducing a dear, dear friend of mine, Jesús Gerena, the CEO of UpTogether. UpTogether is a national organization with a bold mission of changing policies, systems, and underlying beliefs so that all people in the United States are seen and invested in for their strengths. A native of Puerto Rico, Jesús moved with his mother and siblings to Amherst, Massachusetts at just 9 years old, and he'll share some of his story with you today of how his life experiences have shaped him. But more important than any of that, at least to me, is that Jesús is a dear friend with whom I've had the pleasure of learning and growing over the last 10 years as part of the Bar Fellowship, and I couldn't be more proud to know him and more proud of him and the important work that he's done to raise the nation's consciousness on issues of poverty and on true community-led transformation and change. He inspires me each and every day, and I feel grateful to be in this work with him and to have him here today. Ladies and gentlemen, Jesús Gerena.
And good morning, and thank you, Bob, for such a kind introduction. It's great to see everybody and to be in the city this morning with all of you. I did also want to share a special thank you to Bob, who, as he noted, has been a longtime friend. And as he shared, we were connected about a decade ago as part of the Bar Fellowship in 2015. But we got together in 2014 first, so that's why I count a decade, all right? And similar to our family's experience at UpTogether, once we connected, we began to meet regularly and haven't stopped since. We've been able to share as we meet regularly in every aspect of our lives and support one another, as well as to share specifically around the passion that we want to be able to bring impact, whether it's to the city of Boston and beyond. And I know I'm not alone as Bob winds down his tenure here at United Way in being eternally grateful for his work and his many contributions to making Boston a better city to live in and every day. Really, thank you so much, Bob. And I know that you'll continue to do that in new ways and can't wait to hear more. So I'm really excited to be back and have this opportunity to share some thoughts to help shape the conversation today. As many of you know, this is where I began my career in social justice work and eventually with UpTogether. That was 15 years ago, which feels like a long, long time ago. I had a little less gray hair in my beard. But before that, let me share a little bit of background. After spending the first decade of my career in Boston at the High Squares Task Force, working with youth organizers who were trying to change their lives and their community, I recognized its limits. The work was impactful on an individual basis and inside of our community, yet a more systemic impact was fleeing, and I was hungry for it, and I was looking for ways to be able to grow it. And it was around this time that I met Mauricio Lynn Miller, the founder of the Family Independence Initiative, FII National, who was in the process of launching this work here in Boston with the generous support of a number of key foundations, as I see Gita at the Boston Foundation at the time, the Bar Foundation, as well as Green Life Fund and EOS Foundation. Now, as I heard him and I had the opportunity to hear him speak, something stuck with me as he shared that all of our solutions to poverty were top-down. We kept coming up with new programs or interventions to fix people or to help them. We kept telling people that they needed what they needed, ignoring the biggest resource that we had, the very people affected. And this resonated with me as an organizer. It pushed my own limits of what I could do to help others, to the very reason why I came to this work in the social sector, to help. And here I heard this man share, right, that the simple understanding that we didn't need to help or come up with solutions to poverty. People had the ability to do it for themselves. What they needed was the resources and opportunities to be able to do so. Now you can imagine I was hooked, and I applied to become the inaugural director of the Boston site and somehow got the job. Now, we launched in 2010 promoting the tenets of our approach, cash, choice, and community for families. On the cash end, it is what many of us see today as a guaranteed income. At the time, it wasn't easily accepted. When we explained to folks about our work, common questions we kept coming up against was, well, how can you trust people that they'll do the right thing with these dollars? Or when we shared that we weren't a program or a service, the next question would be, then what do you do? Well, what we did was to get out of the way and model the impact of direct investment and the power of community. We began to build the evidence that this worked, that the idea is not new, as guaranteed income was talked about in the 60s by Dr. King as well as the Black Panthers, because they knew that poverty was a policy choice. What was new is that Boston served as the first expansion of this work outside of California. And of course, it led the way. And even though the concept was new, it quickly came into families' radar and we grew. From our initial 35 families, which started here in Boston, and initially actually just 7 that brought together those 35 families. Through them, through the conversations that they had with one another, we quickly grew to 1,000 strong. And this growth was led by them. They spread the message and they enrolled others into it. And it was the power of that community that really catalyzed the work of our organization. And even though we were a national organization, I was often invited to participate on a national work. And they kept saying, come on and help us do this across the country. And I would keep coming back and saying, actually, no, Boston needs to be the star of this movement. It can help be the example for others to be able to follow it. And I repeatedly declined that invitation for as long as I could, because I wanted to be able to help grow Boston, for it to be the beacon for others to follow. Now, when I think about those early days in Boston, I never would have imagined that in 2019, we would launch the Trust and Invest initiative, which I'll talk a little bit more about, as well as when COVID hit, that we would be in a position to be able to distribute $130 million to 200,000 households across the country in a 9-month period of time. And as I stand in this room, I can feel that momentum that began to grow even further in 2020 carry on today. And I can think about what can be next. In addition to that, last year, as an organization, we adopted a new strategic plan that positioned us to be a systems change organization. Critical for us is that we don't want to do this in perpetuity. We don't want to have to continue to do demonstrations. What we want to do is partner with key organizations and philanthropy to help shape government and policies to better support our families. Not for the sake of more evidence, because we have enough evidence, but for the sake of being able to position a way to show what the ability of investing in people looks like to shape those policies at the end. So this is a great segue to thinking and talking a little bit about the Trust and Invest initiative, which was a groundbreaking 18-month randomized control trial, or RCT, in Greater Boston, looking at the effect of $500 a month of guaranteed income, as well as the effects of peer groups on financial and social well-being. We were able to enroll 1,500 households altogether, which is one of the largest studies in the country. We were able to partner with the Massachusetts Department of Transitional Assistance, as well as the study completed last year. We had an 87% survey response rate, thanks in part to our family partners and putting families at the center as evaluators. Now, as I mentioned, we already have countless stories of how participation impacted members, and it mirrors what we see around the country over and over again. People tell us that they have more time with their families, their children can enjoy activities, they can buy enough food for their family, they can stabilize their housing, they have less stress in their lives, and more security. UpTogether has invested more than $210 million in individuals and families since 2020 alone. And this data from our work and guaranteed income pilots from across the country shows the same thing again over and over. I'll just keep repeating it. Members use the investments of direct cash over necessities. They invest to reduce stress and support their mental health. They invest in supporting their housing stability. And that direct investment has a lasting effect in the way that they see one another and support one another and strengthen their own community. right? And just to highlight that point over and over again, we did this in a guaranteed income pilot in Oakland, California, and as people were selected, and they literally won the lottery, right? Like there were over 2,500 individuals who pre-qualified to be able to participate. 300 were selected, and immediately when we asked what would they be doing with the money, the first thing that they talked about was, how do I invest, how do I take this opportunity to invest back in others around me? How do I use these dollars to keep it inside of these very shops and businesses that are supporting me? That is critical for us to be able to succeed, because me alone succeeding is not enough. I want to use this opportunity to help others succeed as well. It's extraordinary to see guaranteed income become mainstream. In 2018, we saw the Mothers Magnolias Trust in Mississippi. In 2019, Mayor Tubbs of Stockton started a guaranteed income there. And in 2020, we even had a presidential candidate talk about universal basic income, right? From those early days of like, what are you gonna use this money for? And what do you do? To, no, this is becoming mainstream. People are recognizing that to be able to address poverty in this country, we need to continue to look at and invest in our biggest asset, people. So when 2020 hit and COVID hit, government and philanthropic funders across the country saw cash as necessary. And over again, the results continue to prove, right? The increase of the child tax credit in 2021 by the federal government took 3 million kids out of poverty overnight in July of 2021. The single largest metric move as it relates to poverty in the last 60 years. In December 31st, 2021, we put them back in. Poverty is a policy choice. We are continuously creating these barriers and these challenges to the individuals and the households who suffer financial hardship. And so demonstrations are impactful, yes. And especially to those receiving cash, to build that evidence. They get the benefit of it, but alone they won't suffice. It's time to move from pilot to permanence, and that's why I'm here today. So UpTogether has a simple model: community, capital, and choice. Invest in people directly. Trust them to make their own decisions. Allow them to find their own solutions. Track their social and economic mobility. Learn from their experience, and value their communities. Now that, again, part about community is critical. Relationships are what sustain us, right? They're critical for us in the long term. Cash is great, trust me, I know. And it has an immediate impact, but long term, that community component is what's gonna be able to support us long term. So by investing in individuals and family, we're also investing in their communities and strengthening those ties. We're changing the way we see families experiencing poverty and their communities. We know that people are not to blame for their financial situation. People need direct investment in their own lives. People must have full choice and control over their time and resources. And all these years later, it's amazing that today I get to sit here and share with you all as it's a movement that is growing inside of our city. Oh man, it's no longer my city, but you know what I mean. Which means, right, that we've worked with incredible folks and partners along the way. And thinking again about Gita, as well as Councillor Siddiqui in Cambridge, who launched Cambridge Rise in 2018. Not only did she help launch Family Independence Initiative in 2010, but also in 2018. And I think as a result of that, of Lita, who is a member of the Cambridge Rise community who received those $500 a month, who not only talks about finally being able to meet her basic needs and not worry about running out of gas on the way to school, or perhaps more importantly, how the cash opened up the space for her to connect with her daughter, her friends, and family. They don't have to worry about those day-to-day making critical decisions to meet basic needs, but also how they can now not only strengthen their ties inside and outside of their household, as well as how to pursue other goals inside of their lives. We're seeing a greater understanding as a result of all of this work that racist and deficit-based policies and practices are responsible for creating the wealth gap and inequalities in our country. We've also provided proof again that this works. So imagine what's next. When we gather here again in 10 years, what's possible? And hopefully y'all will invite me back. I know this room is already is ready. Most of you have already been taking action. From the community organizations and leaders, you see the impact of investment and you feel the impact of our deficit-based system. Please keep advocating, work with us. We need to do this as a joint chorus to be able to continue to grow this work. To our funding partners, we know that you cannot solve this on your own. And we've seen here in Boston and in other cities across the country that philanthropy plays a key role to help government shift. And we need both at the table and their investment. So thank you again to the United Way for publicly prioritizing guaranteed income. What would be possible if all funders in Massachusetts did the same? To our government partners, there is no shortage of crisis you are dealing with. And we've seen at the federal level and by some of our neighbors like in Connecticut, we can simplify and have a greater impact when we enact policies that center the dignity and choice of people, whether there's a guaranteed income, baby bonds, as I mentioned, the child tax credit, or their income tax credit. The time is now. Hopefully we can keep moving. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for your leadership and for leaving us with a lot to chew on and think about as we dive into our panel today.